Hello, this is Peter Landau. I am the managing editor of Newsjunkie.net, and I am speaking with Gordon Whiting, the publisher of Newsjunkie. He recently sent out a newsletter called the Mutual Aid for the Knowledge Sector, and I wanted to have a few minutes to talk to him about it in depth. In the newsletter, you described the knowledge sector as something broader than academia or journalism. What made you start thinking about all of these professions as part of one connected ecosystem?
Oh, well, a lot of things, Peter, but I have an association with UCLA through my life partner, and I've been stunned at how much a single campus, a single university in a larger university system has research facilities that are quite advanced. They are not just academic, they cover just about everything you can think of in terms of advance, from particle physics to cancer research. And you visit any other campus of any scale, and there's also similar things. And then there are private laboratories. Often they are doing government work, but not always. They could be, and pharma is a good example. So as we built the subscriber base of our mailing list, and as we have built the audience for Newsjunkie, we find people reacting to our posts and our stories that come from areas that we didn't realize were following us. We originally started speaking just to journalists, editors, publishers, and people that are involved in the work of democracy, all the way down to voter activism and First Amendment issues. I don't mean to say that all the way down to, really, that's kind of the top, is the ground level work. But in other words, from that part of the spectrum of people that have to know what they're doing, they have to know the law, they may be lawyers, they may not be lawyers, but it takes a certain amount of critical mass of knowledge and specialization. It's not the same as scooping ice cream. And we all want that scoop of ice cream. I'm not talking about a status level for a particular job, but there is a large part of the employment pie in this country and around the world that does advanced work, work that is predicated on other advanced work. That's the knowledge sector. If you do work that is based on other science and research and you're advancing that or part of maintaining that, that's the knowledge sector.
And you say that the threats are not separate in that knowledge sector. What connections are you seeing between the attacks on science, archives, journalism, education, and public data?
Well, President Trump did us a favor by attacking selectively kind of these surgical attacks that Doge and other, the budget, Office of Budget and Management have been attacking. But I don't know what their motivations are. I've said this in previous conversations. I'm not a political scientist that understands it at that level, what the motivations might be, what bases they're serving, and so forth. But there are a few obvious ones. If you build a political movement based on nativism or rage against elites, then universities, whatever it would be legitimate criticism of them, by attacking them, you please the base. From a different sector, if you have lobbyists that are working, giving you money or your movement money, and they would like to sell more fossil fuel products, then climate science is in their way. So attacking these things to remove their presence and remove the credibility. Kennedy has peddled a mythology about vaccines and other things, salted with some actual good stuff, about healthy eating and so forth. So it sounds appealing to a large base. When you bring someone like that into your movement, you want to please that base. So you attack those things, you undermine their credibility, you remove their presence as much as possible. That's as much as I could say. I mean, it's probably levels of sophistication that I can't guess. I only know the things I just spoke of.
Going back to the title of your newsletter, the Mutual Aid for the Knowledge Sector, what does that look like in practice?
Well, there isn't anything actually in practice of any scale. It's just emerging. But what it looks like, first of all, is communication. So you need a place, you need your Reddit forums and other places where you have some level accessibility to other people that may be feeling the same threats or have the same aspirations. Your interest group, whether it's about something about defense and something negative, or it's about aspirational and where you want to go, your interest group. So you need that. First of all, Newsjunkie is doing some of that. We're aspirational about adding more, being able to have more forum-like participation from our audience. It's hard to do, but there is a lot already there. So that's the first thing, is what does mutual aid look like? It's just simply solidarity and communication. But more than that, it's legal defense. You know, there are lawyers for reporters at the Advance Center in New York City. And obviously, our friends at the ACLU, and every local ACLU have local ACLUs that are dealing with issues in each regional community. Very important organization, get in touch with them. There are so many organizations, many of them can be found at Newsjunkie's Prairie Fire resource page. And that would be the next thing, is to get in touch and stay in touch, put some effort in just communicating and finding out where the needs are.
In the newsletter, you also mentioned how researchers, activists, librarians, journalists are stepping up to preserve the endangered information. Were you surprised by the scale or speed of those grassroots efforts?
Oh, I'm pleased for sure. I mean, there are some ongoing, well-organized things like Internet Archive. And anybody that doesn't know Internet Archive or has only heard of it, go there and be amazed. They have been doing this kind of thing of data preservation systematically for almost 30 years, including saving government data sets. Check out the Data Rescue Project at Prairie Fire on Newsjunkie. There are a lot of organizations doing it. I guess I was a little surprised that there are enough people taking this seriously, i.e., this might be life and death. This is not just a different president from a different party, and then when he's out, our party will swing back in, and it goes a little bit this way, then it goes a little bit that this might be off the cliff kind of stuff, and enough people grasped that and stepped into the fray, and I'm very happy about that.
One of the things you mentioned in the newsletter is that we might be entering one of the most fertile periods in human understanding. You say that this moment is both threatening and full of possibilities.
All I mean by that is we have built and built and built since Galileo. The idea of knowledge and science as built on the axioms, principles, fact sets of previous work, or tested and disproven over time. You know, you have Ptolemy replaced by Copernicus, if I got that right. You know, the Earth goes around the sun and not the other way around. So eventually things, just imagine these 500 years, odd years since Galileo, the compounding is what I'm talking about. And now with digital and now the internet, the compounding has reached a really magnificent level of speed. Distribution is fantastic. So, you know, just say health and medical, the advances that have occurred, will continue to occur, are astonishing and wonderful to contemplate. And then here comes the wrecking ball. So, you know, we're poised, and yet now there's quite a bit that has to be defended. Now, I'd be the first to say a lot of it doesn't need to be defended, some of it. So the idea that there's no excess and there's no bloat, that's not true. There is. Just a lot of things that just don't really need to have all those millions of dollars. I don't know which ones, but I think coming in with a big sledgehammer, the way DOGE and Office of Management, Budget and Management did, is reckless, is foolish. It's diminished us. It's just diminished us.
I also wanted to touch on your reference to Don Swanson's idea of undiscovered public knowledge. How does that concept relate to the work Newsjunkie is trying to do with Prairie Fire?
Don Swanson, information scientist at the University of Chicago, came up with this idea of, which he termed undiscovered public knowledge, which kind of alludes to what I was talking about, you know, starting with Galileo. You have more and more information that's not hidden, but it could be in this data set, that data set. You combine those data sets, and now there's a lot of things that could be interesting correlations. You might discover something new having to do with genes and sequencing, and that this affects this kind of sets of diseases and so forth. But it doesn't materialize until somebody goes after it and discovers the correlation, and then you see the proofs, or you need further proof, but this gave you the foundation to find it. That's the undiscovered public knowledge. It's there, it's public, it's not knowledge until it has no utility until it's put together. And there's more and more of that in this digital/internet age that we are sitting in at this moment. And the way Newsjunkie deals with this, we're trying to fuse the ideas of flows of information, including news. I mean, our primary motto is who's behind the news. And that doesn't mean just the owners. It means who's making it, who are the editors and publishers and writers and ground troops that are there working the product, making it something that then can be part of the information flow that makes it out to readers and listeners. And with that, to do that intelligently, if we want to fuse that to principles of information science. So undiscovered public knowledge starts with well-structured data. It's hard to do. We're just putting together these wonderful data sets of, we called it the Fired But Fighting group. That's actually one of the groups that we interviewed for Prairie Fire. But it's all kind of this fired but fighting. What happened? People lost their jobs. They got put on administrative leave. Their data sets got hidden behind walls, or who knows what happened to them. The Disappearing Data Project we're now going to participate in with the National Security Archive at George Washington University. Undiscovered public, there's a lot. We don't really have, we're not looking for a precise needle in this haystack, but we are now structuring data so that this kind of information could be found. So maybe the first and primary example would be this Disappearing Data Project, which folks can see already. The skeleton of that, quite thorough already, is at National Security Archive. That's Rachel Santasieros is leading that project.
You might have answered my next question, but outside of research or journalism, a lot of people see these issues as abstract. So how do you explain why disappearing data sets or weakened archives matter to ordinary people?
Yeah, a reasonable question. But it's like, if we didn't have good data for air traffic controllers, would you take that flight to London? We do rely on an enormous amount of fundamental science, research, fact sets continuously. I mean, a cruder example, would you go up to the observation deck of the Empire State Building if part of the foundation had been removed? We just took it out. But you can still get in the elevator and go to the 108th, 110th floor. It's a wonderful thing, but I wouldn't do it if somebody said, they took part of that foundation out. Some of it's still there, but not all of it. And I wouldn't get in an airplane if I didn't I already have some doubts. I think we have doubts now about what's happening with air traffic control. Do you
feel that Prairie Fire's reporting is going to reach out to people that are not journalists, not researchers, help them understand the importance of the data that's supporting so much of what they don't pay attention to in their lives?
Yeah, I think so. The Prairie Fire is a movement, it's a department or, an effort and an initiative here at Newsjunkie that looks at this phenomenon of political interference with science, social science, access to the vote and other things, habeas corpus, all the things that are being challenged, are being curtailed. We're looking at it to try to quantify it, and we're interviewing those people that are really on the ground. We're interviewing those that are doing the groundwork, and we're sharing their information. And that's what Prairie Fire is. And you can see it and you can participate in it as well.
Now, the other side of the coin is that you emphasize decentralized preservation and collaboration. Do you think the future of public knowledge is going to rely less on large institutions and more on networks of smaller organizations and communities?
Well, I don't know, Peter. I think there will be a raised consciousness about more independent, that both will, continue to, one will rise, that's independent work, and that government and large institutional studies will not go away, but they need to interrelate more, probably. That would be my guess, because we've just, this is an inflection point, an overused cliche. It's a big moment, a change in how the big steamship of government and research was going, and it's changed. Change was forced, but that change will, those consequences will roll out. I think that independent work will rise, and hopefully we'll all, because we have better sharing tools, the internet, and good protocols for safe communications if they're used. And maybe we can, all these various parties can work together on large issues.
Well, as a news junkie who is very intimate with journalism, do you think there's a role that journalists be playing beyond just simply reporting the news?
Well, we've been disrupted too. So a lot of people have lost their equilibrium and say, well, you should really do good work and call out bad behavior. Well, journalists do that. I mean, the good ones, we've been doing it. So you can't really coach them to do that or admonish if they're already saying something I don't know. But what I would say that might be a different take on it is think about who you're talking to specifically. Envision your community and speak in ways that will attract them to what you're writing, and think about it and perhaps act on what you're writing. You're not just up in a office building, figuratively at your typewriter with your cigarette trying to make deadline. You might be up in a building with a laptop, and that is a way, once you get your file, your facts together and you're doing the story, make sure you're thinking with a little more emphasis on who you're speaking to and what can you do in your writing and in your work helping to publicize the story, because often writers are involved in being interviewed about their story. Connecting with who you think it's really for and speak to them.
Yeah, knowing your audience is the rule number one, I would think, about any sort of writing. Very hard to do. Speaking of writing, we'll end on a note about your newsletter and the people that are reading it. And what, if they want to help, what is the most useful first steps they can take?
There's so many things you can do. There's wonderful organizations. So you can check in at Prairie Fire and drop a note to Morgan at newsjunkie.net, who runs Prairie Fire, is our lead reporter and organizer there. And on Prairie Fire, you will see many other organizations that are doing various things with data preservation and other kinds of activism and helping scientists, researchers, and others that have been lost their jobs or have been otherwise threatened. And at Newsjunkie at large, there are all those organizations you can find, like Committee to Protect Journalists and Reporters Without Borders, and many of the UN organizations. And like I mentioned, the Vance Center has the Lawyers for Reporters. You can find all those in there. Look up information at Newsjunkie's search engine. Go to Google and find an organization that deals with the First Amendment, deals with prisoners' rights, or deals with, habeas corpus. And see, volunteer or just find out more. Write letters to your congressman, to your president. It does matter.
It does matter. Thank you, Gordon. I appreciate the time you've taken with us. And if people want to learn more, I recommend they come visit newsjunkie.net and the Prairie Fire Project that we have on the site.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank
Appreciate your work.
You're welcome.